Hi and welcome everybody. If you're just joining us here for our second session of the morning, Engineering a Sustainable Future. We'll just wait 1 minute for everybody to join us, and then I will introduce our wonderful speakers who are here with us this morning. Whilst we're just waiting, if you have any questions at all, as Helen and Angela are presenting, please do feel free to put them into the chat, and then we will have time for Q&A at the end. So don't worry about posting questions during the presentation. The more the merrier, and then we'll be able to go through everything at the end when we have time for Q&A. Okay, I think we're ready to go. So I'm delighted this morning to introduce Dr. Helen Messy and Angela Hobbs, who will give you their very own introductions of themselves. Delighted to have you here. And please bear with us. Helen was having some IT issues, which I think now seem to have cleared up, Helen, which is good.
Hopefully, yes.
Which is good. She was dipping in and out a minute ago. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you. I'm going to take myself off camera and enjoy the webinar. And please do ask Q&A as you go through. Over to you both.
Thank you, Caroline. Good morning, everyone. And I do hope that you can hear me. I do hope that my camera isn't breaking up too much. Welcome to our presentation this morning. I'm an engineer and I'm a chartered member of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers. And I've been working in various industries, both in academia and in industry itself, for over 20 years. Consultancy, a medtech consultancy in 2018, which has given me a really wonderful opportunity to work with startups, researchers, and clinicians to help them develop their innovations and ideas. And in ensuring that technology is benefiting the whole of society, which is really something that is at the core of who I am. I'm the chair also of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers Biomedical Engineering Division. I'm a past trustee of the institution, and I'm also a member of the Royal Academy of, so that's me.
Thanks, Helen. I think we are losing you a little bit, so I'm hoping I'm not interrupting you here. I think that was you handing over to me. I just lost the last little bit. I'm sorry. So very, very briefly, my name's Angela Hobbs. Completely different background from Helen. I work in sustainable business. I'm a resident innovation coach at Oxford University Incubator. And also, Helen and I both work with the design engineering team at Cambridge University, and there's going to be more on that later. Helen's going to discuss what we're doing there. My main work is focusing around helping businesses to innovate and grow with a sustainable focus. I completed my MSc in sustainable business at Bath University a long time ago now. That was in 2009. And although I celebrate every positive change I see, I'm still rather saddened by the fact that they don't happen quickly enough. But let's stay on the positive and say all change is good and all transitions are positive. So let's focus on that. As a quick heads up, another passion of mine is my dissertation was 20,000 words on internal and external barriers to women. And I still continually ask today why, when we need all the creative thinking and the innovation that we possibly can bring to the table, do we still exclude so many people? But that's another story. Outside that, I'm a non-executive director for a life sciences organization called OBN. And I also I sit on the board of Chats with Schools, which is a group of 16 schools. Mainly because that reflects my passion for education and learning. And I'll hand over to Helen.
Well, thank you, Angela. Today, we want to show why it matters and how, in combining our respective loves of engineering and business, it has led to the creation of the Engineering Better Care
Helen, it's Caroline here. I was just going
Academy,
to say,
which provides training to anyone looking to deliver sustainable.
Helen, apologies. I was just going to say it might be better if you turn your camera off and then we can just hear your audio, I think, because you're continuing to buffer. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. That's no problem at all. I'll start that little section again then in that case. So today we're here to share our thoughts on engineering a sustainable future, why it matters and business. It has led to the creation of the Engineering Better Care Academy, which provides training to anyone looking to deliver sustainable, measurable outcomes in innovation and transformation. It's off with my first thoughts in this area. As COP26 approaches and the IMechE readies itself for its 2-day conference on making COP art our session by bringing into focus what sustainability means to us as engineers. You see, as someone who works in the healthcare sector, there is one particular mind on a daily basis. And it states clearly that as engineers, we must do no harm by not compromising the welfare, health, and safety of society, by upholding public interest, and by listening to the concerns and needs of society. This is the core of our professional obligations, and it sits at the heart, for me, of any, fortunately, barriers to achieving this. Now, back in 2019, the Engineering Council produced a guidance on sustainability for engineers, which was updated to reflect the 6 principles I've stated here. The Engineering Council acknowledge in their statements that despite our drive to do no harm, engineers' patients, hamstrung, as we often are, by the requirements and restrictions placed on us by the businesses that we work for in terms of things like budgets, materials, design. So take the Chernobyl nuclear reactor, for example, the site of the worst man-made disaster of the 20th century. The term sustainability was not on the lips of term consequences of nuclear disaster were considered extremely small versus the economic benefits to the Soviet Union. Yet nearly 35 years on, the repercussions of bureaucracy are still being felt locally, nationally, and even globally today. Now, the new sarcophagus, which is now in situ over the crumbling reactor engineering project in the world, it weighed 35,000 tons. It was taller than the Statue of Liberty and bigger than Wembley Stadium. This structure is designed to enclose this site for the next $100 million. Now, the sustainability of that facility is now key to the vast and long-term project of dismantling and clearing the site. And we are not going to see its end in our life. Vision of the company managing it to reduce the situation by creating a positive impact on the environment. Several generations of engineers will and in upholding a professional reputation to safeguard the public interest. But we are also seeing this kind of move towards engineering practices in many other sectors, including my own in healthcare engineering, where it's taken a global pandemic for senior management within the NHS to recognise the value of engineers and engage them directly in addressing life and death challenges. In healthcare, cost savings have been typically paramount over any concern concern about sustainable practices. But with the demand for PPE and medical equipment, the issue of sustainable management of things like one-use devices and the disposal of contaminated materials has led to engineers' professional insight being highly prized. So it's my belief that the leadership and influencing role of engineers in achieving net zero should not be underestimated. For too long, they have not had a voice in determining the direction that businesses take. Increasingly, engineers are part of multidisciplinary teams that include non-engineers, working across sectorial and even international boundaries, and they're becoming much more vocal on the need to safeguard the environment and society over financial and economic gain. So with that in mind, our professional obligations have never. This is why Angela and I are so very passionate about ensuring engineers take a leadership role in driving change within their businesses. This is where greater understanding of things like regulatory and to facilitate innovative problem solving. But engineers need to go beyond just the usual QMS requirements, don't they, Angela? We need to be talking much more.
Again, forgive me, anyone, if I'm interrupting, but I think we've lost Helen briefly, so I'm going to pick up from there. And if I've interrupted you, I apologise, Helen. What I want to talk about is the business landscape today and what all businesses are dealing with. And we're all familiar, I'm sure you all know as much as me, about the challenge of innovation and regulation and that pace which cannot possibly keep up. And what I want to talk about a little bit today is what happens when you throw legislation into the mix. And there's a lot of disappointment, one particular area at the moment, on the Environment Bill. So this is a bill which has been seriously delayed. And it's a bill that is supposed to make provision about targets and plans and policies for improving our natural environment. Statements and reports about environmental protection, talking about waste and resource efficiency, improving air quality, and, interestingly, the recall of products that fail to meet certain environmental standards. Now, the bill, which includes dozens of commitments on the environment, is seriously delayed. And given that we're just weeks away from COP26, the pressure to get that bill through is increasing, but sadly, the outcomes are not emerging at the same rate. And I think that is just one illustration in that we know what needs to be done, and we know that it won't happen by itself. And changes towards more sustainable business are essential. But if legislation can't keep up and can't help make change happen, then sometimes, as we've all seen, people take matters slightly into their own hands. And as well, some organizations are publicly disrupting day-to-day lives. We've seen examples of that in the news lately with Protester. We saw lots of activities last year by Extinction Rebellion. They do get attention, but they also cause disruption. And I'll leave you to form your own opinion about that. I'm sure you all have them. But this slide here refers to a different kind of challenge. And I just want to talk about this for a little bit. So this is about the Better Business Act. Now, two large organizations, just two examples, Iceland and John Lewis, are among over 700 UK businesses who are demanding new principles of environmental and social responsibility to be added to company law for directors. And they're doing this under the Better Business Act, which is in alliance with B Corp. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So this is about pulling together a challenge from a large number of organizations that can be done in a structured way where the Better Business Act members or partners are going to the government and saying, this is what needs to happen, and we're pushing to make it happen. The co-chair for the coalition of the Better Business Act is a man called Douglas Lamont, who is the CEO of Innocent. And his quote on this was that leaders of businesses of all types and sizes are coming together, united by a clear purpose, which is to set a higher standard for ourselves. So this is really about businesses saying, this is what we need to do, and we want everyone else to join in. And to get more engagement, we're challenging the government to make this happen. Now, in brief, the Act would amend Section 172 of the Companies Act from 2006, which would mean, in general terms, that all companies would be legally obligated to operate in a manner that benefits stakeholders, including workers, customers, communities, and the environment, while seeking still, of course, to deliver profits for shareholders. This Better Business Act really does have the potential to change the way people do business. There's lots of information on their website. Do go and have a look and see what those impacts would be. Or maybe it's even something that you and your business want to join. Have a look. Elsewhere in the world, this approach, which is sometimes called the benefit corporation legislation, is very, very similar, has now been successfully introduced in a number of US states, as well as in Italy, Colombia, and Canada. So a benefit corporation is a traditional business with modified obligations which commit it to higher standards of purpose, accountability, and transparency. And just for reference, I mentioned B Corp. I'm sure many of you know B Corp, but just in case, certified B corporations are businesses that have gone through a process very similar to standards that enable them to meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. And B Corp organizations are really are driving a big acceleration across the world to redefine success in business and talk about a more inclusive and sustainable economy. And the UK, remarkably, is now officially home to the second largest B Corp community in the world, with over 400 B Corp companies representing around 48 industries. And it's becoming something that when organizations don't know where to start, when they say, okay, we know what we need to do, we know what our responsibilities are, how do we do it? In some instances, using an external organization like B Corp can be a brilliant way of following guidelines that are tried and tested and comply with legislation and also regulation. So that's just one example of what was happening outside the traditional routes that companies have taken. And this really all helps me summarize just to say that, in my opinion, engineers are the people with the skills and knowledge to impact on how we make things and how we solve problems. But from my experience, far too often, we don't get to hear their thoughts and be able to benefit from their processes, their innovations, and the way they solve problems until it's too late. So my thoughts are, if a business decides to work to something like B Corp or join the Better Business Act or commit to an ISO standard on sustainability, does that empower engineers, Helen? Does it give them something that, because the whole company is united in working towards, engineers can have a bigger voice? What do you think?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about sustainability learning, we're not just talking about teaching people materials or conserve water or turn off lights. We're talking about creating an environment where sustainable practices and behaviours are inherent in everything that we do. You've already got the ability to think critically, work within a diverse team, and communicate effectively. And these sorts of skills are exactly what future global business leaders will know the challenges facing modern society. The idea of a sustainability qualification is no longer just an add-on to an engineering degree like it was back in my day. Businesses have recognised that engineers is in this field, and universities are responding to that. There are over 100 undergraduate and about 10 postgraduate courses in sustainability, covering everything from food, energy and building services, and even fashion and tourism. Of course, the IMechE has been engaged in the accreditation of sustainable engineering degrees for many years and accredits extremely active in driving change across the engineering sector. That's through the Energy, Environment and Sustainability Group, the EESG. And they're working to would also point out that you can also become a chartered environmentalist through the institution as well. So how much would a sustainability qualification problems? Well, data does suggest that having this kind of knowledge can serve as a beneficial career stepping stone, not to mention providing a increasingly seeking employees who are literate in sustainability across all job roles. Now, perhaps if I give a quick example here, the solar panel sustainable approaches, and even going beyond what most companies would consider their obligation to wider society. They have recognized the value of including sustainable development goals in their long-term plans, and it's really paying off. Now, interestingly, Thomas Werner, who is the CEO of SunPower, doesn't come from the business and finance sector. He is actually an engineer, and he's not solely focused on making a profit for the business, but he sees the broader implications of engaging the global community in his company's growth as paramount to his development. Werner has encouraged his engineers to think beyond the usual STEM outreach programs and has created a Solar Science Academy, which engages college students to think about renewable energy career. And in doing so, Werner and his company have created a workforce pipeline of future engineers and scientists that are already committed to sustainable principles. The business has also partnered with WeCare, a hands-on program for young people that gives them a chance to link science and technology with international philanthropy. And this is a high school student project developing awareness of energy poverty in developing countries. 200-watt solar suitcases, which are then being donated to non-profit groups such as schools and orphanages in regions that lack reliable energy sources. These kinds of initiatives have the power to place organizations of sustainable change. And I believe engineers have the foresight to create viable programs such as this, which don't affect the bottom line, but can have wide-reaching effects on society. I think those in senior positions in industry today have an opportunity to reflect on their business's vision and objectives to ensure that they are not just paying lip service to sustainability, but are considering the long-term business benefits of workforce. And I would certainly encourage engineers to consider expanding their knowledge and their CPD through sustainable engineering training. A degree will not only equip you with ways to address global challenges, but it will also develop specialist skills that are both strategic and adaptive. And for those of you like me who didn't study sustainability per se, but are looking to have greater impact on your organization, Angela and I are running 2 sets starting in March 2022, which will provide you with a selection of tools to enable you to make a stronger case for sustainability within your business. Angela.
Thanks, Helen. So the next slide obviously is going to give you a good clue what I'm going to talk about. But before I start talking about the fashion industry and what's happening there and some of the amazing innovations from engineers, I just want to ask you a question, Helen. So Given the events of the last few days, which it's hard to ignore, it is everywhere and we're all dealing with it, engineers addressed one of our transportation issues with electric cars several years ago, but it does seem as if policymakers, governments, and people didn't change their behaviours very quickly into how we drive and how we travel. What are your thoughts about why the uptake for electric vehicles has been so slow, and what do we need to do about it? And will what we're seeing now have an impact? What's your view as an engineer on that?
Well, I should start by being slightly pedantic, shouldn't I, Angela, and saying that the first operational electric car was actually built in Scotland by an engineer. So I suppose we've been well ahead of the curve for quite a long time from that point of view. I think what's going on at the present time is a prime example of what I call limitations dichotomy, and why we're having engineers involved in key decision making now is so important. Now, of course, I'm going to simplify the situation. Systems of systems which have led and compounded certainly to the present situation we've got with the petrol crisis and and all of those sorts of things. But from a purely sustainability point of view, there is a voice of the engineering industry. Had it been listened to in the last 2 or 3 decades, particularly around things like clean transport and infrastructure and the built environment, we may not be in the present predicament that we are. Opportunities for large-scale rollout of EV infrastructure, technical demonstrators for things like carbon capture and hydrogen use, ensuring that we have a workforce that is prepared and ready for these changes through sustainability and resilience training, have all really been missed or have lacked support to the point at which we are not seeing the uptake of these sorts of technologies. Economic and socio-political situations have really hamstrung technical innovation in this case. But we are really at a critical juncture. We can no longer or agreement. We have to have the courage of our convictions as engineers to uphold our professional reputation, to safeguard the public interest for the long term. And looking at some of the figures of electric vehicles and what's been produced, even over the last 10 years, the uptake is there. People have an opportunity to vehicles, and yet we're not seeing that encouragement that they should be really getting from those other stakeholders that are really limiting these innovations. So I think that's my take on it, really. Who else is having the courage outside of electric vehicles to make responsible changes, Angela, when it comes to creating?
Well, you can see from this slide here. Oh, I'm so sorry, Helen, for any overlap. Sometimes I'm just missing the last 10 seconds. I do apologize to everyone. So here I'm just going to talk about some of the industries that are responsible, but I'm not necessarily picking on the fashion industry, but there are some amazing stats which really do bring home what has to change. And I think what's important when we look at the fashion industry is the global reach and impact. So, for example, in a recent report by Vogue and the United Nations, it can take almost 8,000 gallons of water, the equivalent of what one person is going to drink in 7 years, to make a pair of jeans. And when those jeans are discarded, they join the 21 billion tons of textiles that end up in landfills each year. And of those items, 3 in 5 will be discarded within a year. We've all got accessible fast fashion. The attitude to clothes and how we wear them has changed in an extraordinary way. I'm sure I'm not the only one. That I remember very much a time when I had new clothes when I grew out of them, or they wore out, or I just didn't need them anymore because I couldn't apply them, or I couldn't use them. But today, shopping and fashion is a very, very different behavior. We shop as a pastime, we shop as a habit. So, but the same problem occurs in the fashion industry as it does in many others. Most of the waste is in the production. And the Environmental Audit Committee recently discovered that 15% of all clothing fabric is wasted at the cutting stage of production before it even gets into stores. And during Fashion Revolution's 2021 week, it emerged that 200 million trees are felled each year to make cellulosic fabrics, and 35 to 40% of those come from old growth woodlands. So I could give you a whole load of stats about the problems in the fashion industry, but what's being done about it? Well, we know that the industrialization and globalization of production and the economy enable multinational companies to produce in one country and sell in another. And this is how fast fashion brands produce very, very cheap clothes. So what are we going to do about it? Whilst there are some amazing innovative companies, for example, Patagonia, and I could name many, many others, a wonderful company called Elvis and Cressy, who do the most brilliant work in sustainability in clothes and fashion, are really, really pushing the boundaries. In fact, the Elvis and Cressy example is one which I love so much. The founders of that business went to, many years ago, approached the London Fire Brigade and said, well, what happens to the hose that you use when it fails regulation or it's no longer safe to use? And they explained that obviously it couldn't be used for safety reasons. So Elvis and Cressy took that fire hose and used it and repurposed it and produced a whole range in a very sustainable way of items that could be resold and repurposed. And also thought about the social aspects, where they made sure that many people who couldn't always go to work in a traditional setting but could work at home were able to do so. So that's just a really lovely story of what some people are doing. There's obviously many of those. I mean, the fashion, textile and apparel industry is the third largest manufacturing industry in the world, with a growth rate that is actually overtaking high growth sectors in some countries. But the waste that they're creating has to be addressed. So how do engineers get involved in that? And this is one of my favorite stories. And this is from an event in 2020. This was for World Engineering Day for Sustainable Development, which was celebrated on the 4th of March and is going to be done so every year as a UNESCO International Day of Celebration of Engineers and Engineering. And what happened was all of the collaborators in that got together and said, right, we're going to have a competition, and it's going to be called Young Engineers, Future Leaders, for innovation in any idea that was connected to one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So over 400 entries came in from around 70 countries around the world, all from engineers with an idea that was linked to address a sustainable development goal. And the winner was an amazing person called Ada Rafat, an engineer who produced something for her business, which is called Dye Recycle. And it's a process she developed to address textile waste in the fashion industry. Her work contributes to achieving Sustainable Development Goal number 12, which is responsible consumption and production, by addressing the issue of overproduction in the textile industry. And what she'd actually done was create a sustainable dye alternative. A fascinating story. I've got the link. I can put it in the chat later. It's a really good example of what happens when bigger organizations or institutions say, okay, what ideas have you got, engineers? What can you put out there? And the stories, not just the winner, but many other people got involved in that process, produced outstanding results. And I think this really, really does demonstrate the impact of collaboration, innovation and technology, and shows that when engineers, when young, inspiring, innovative engineers have the opportunity to do what they're thinking and put it into practice and get it out there, the results are outstanding. And what we clearly need is more of that at a bigger scale, and we need it to happen faster. So how do we make that happen, Helen?
Well, that's a very good question, Angela. I kind of wanted to share this wonderful example of how engineers, and in this particular case, clinicians, have come together to create sustainable change. I'm not sure that that this will allow me to run this little video here, unfortunately. But for more than 25 years, in fact, the Cambridge Engineering Design Centre at Cambridge University has undertaken fundamental and applied research to knowledge that improves the design process. And in 2016, they worked with the Royal Academy of Engineering to publish a report entitled Engineering Better Care, a systems approach to health and care design improvement. We'll put a link to that in the chat. It was co-produced with engineers, clinicians, and healthcare leaders, and was a collaboration with the Royal College of Physicians of Medical Sciences. Now, the report explored how an engineering approach could be applied in health and social care to develop sustainable change that met the needs of patients, carers, and NHS staff. This report presented an improvement process, which is based on a series of different perspectives and questions that enable a team or individual to take their current mission, their current practice, and deliver something that was measurably better into service. Now, why is this relevant to engineering a sustainable future, I hear you ask, and why is this so important? Well, the ability of individuals to learn enhances their chances of delivering and sustaining effective systems, and a systems approach to problem solving that engineers naturally use lends itself to creating mutually reinforced attitudes, beliefs, and behaviours, causing sustainability to become largely inherent in the thinking and working processes. Now, more recently, the NHS has recognised that its response to be more sustainable is now more important than ever, and after publishing its report, a Greener NHS initiative in October 2020. Adopting innovative approaches using engineers will, by the means by which they achieve their goals. Now, going back to the Cambridge team, they took this framework that they put, and over the next few years, they created the Engineering Better Care Toolkit and resources to help those seeking to create change in the workplace to put these things into practice. This is a means to translate the description of a systems approach into an actionable program of improvement. Now, organizations such as the Marie Curie Foundation, the Haven Cambridge Hospital Trust all took up the challenge and employed a toolkit and a systems methodology. And it resulted in some incredible outcomes. A number of innovative projects were undertaken and were successfully implemented by the clinicians and improvement staff. And additionally, retrospective analysis of clinical data using the approach as also enabled clinicians to improve existing like drug delivery and also care for older adults. So Angela and I have seen firsthand how this kind of collaboration of really very unlikely professions has changed the way patients and other stakeholders work together, particularly in the development of things like medical devices, with systems thinking and life cycle design process resulting in sustainably better products. So there is a lot of exciting things that are out there, and we are really here describing this incredible opportunity where you wouldn't have expected these two communities to come together, but they've been able to incredible and quite complex problems. But this is just one example where collaboration with engineers has really led to some improvements in sustainable practice. practices. Who else, Angela, are made across the business sector right now?
Thanks, Helen. So there was a recent report on consumer activity, and it was a really, really interesting story about the fact that people are increasingly voting with their wallets. People are choosing brands and organizations with a very strong commitment to sustainability, and that is slowly impacting, and brands in turn are reacting to that. So few of the things I want to talk about here, and this slide relates to Elvis and Cressy, who I talked about earlier. I'm sorry, there was a bit of a slow change over on the slide. I do apologize. But what I want to talk about here is the other organizations that are really making a big difference. So, for example, increasingly, there are more companies adopting the Sustainable Development Goals to align their marketing, branding, and production activities. I already talked about how that was used with the World Federation of Engineers and Inspiring Young Futures, with the amazing winner of Dye Recycle. But there are other brands doing this too. So another worldwide brand that has made it their mission to make a difference in people's lives, and mostly known for paper hygiene projects, is Kimberly-Clark. And what they did very early on is that they connected with a number of other industry-leading companies, and they formed the Toilet Board Coalition, supporting Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which is for clean water and sanitation. So they work towards that goal, and they report on their results and activities, and that commitment really does inspire a number of other people around them in the same industry to join in and see what they can do. And when we link that back to consumer activity and where people are looking for more answers, this becomes a stronger and stronger incentive for companies to have their own sustainability credentials. Another one is Lego, which obviously I'm sure we're all familiar with, but Lego, they commit to Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which is on ensuring quality education and lifelong learning for all. And for example, in 2018, Lego held a series of sustainability-focused events worldwide to talk about what needed to be done and what change could take place. And they launched a Lego wind turbine model, which contained an instruction booklet with interesting facts about climate change and wind industry and what actually could be done. So they really did attach themselves to that education piece. Other companies like the Discovery Channel, for example, use their own research and development resources and acknowledge really that the power of change is all about partnerships. It is about making big connections. The Discovery Channel teamed up with charity organization Oceana for the past few years to protect sharks from the fin trade that affects up to 73 million sharks per year. And their efforts aim to tackle Sustainable Development Goal number 14, life below water. Another very inspiring engineer, which I'm not sure how many of you will have heard of, incredible person, do look them up, called Boyan Slat, who has produced the most incredible prototype and large machine to actually clean up plastics from rivers before it enters the ocean. Now, as a very, very young engineer, he's always been an incredible innovator and entrepreneur. His story is amazing, but what's happening now is he's actually getting far more traction and scale and investment. And this year partnered with Brabantia, who obviously very well known for appliances, who actually, when you buy one of their products, you will find a recognition and a reference and some information about Boyan Slat and his company and what he's doing to clear up river waste and plastic going into the ocean. Now, I'm going to finish very clearly. So I've talked about jeans, I've talked about fashion, I've talked about Lego and the Discovery Channel. I just want to talk about beer very briefly, although it's probably a little bit early in the day. So, fascinating story emerged on Friday of last week, which was a much more positive story than some of the other ones we were listening to. And this was about the food industry and vertical farming, which has to be a great celebration for the innovation and ideas of engineers in how we solve the food crisis that we're lurching towards. So Goose Island UK and Aerofarms have partnered together to launch Hail Hydro, which is a session IPA, and it's all about advancing sustainable brewing. It's brewed with hops, which are grown indoors by Aerofarms. If you don't know that business, again, look them up. The work they're doing in vertical farming technology is amazing, absolutely fascinating work. So Aerofarms, who are also a certified B Corporation business and a leader in indoor vertical farming, have unveiled this new product, and it's all about a groundbreaking technology in hydroponic hops, which are grown indoors, and it's about focusing on elevating agriculture around the world and addressing some of the most pressing agricultural supply chain challenges, driven by engineers. It's a really, really positive story. And Aerofarms have been around for a long time, I think from around 2004, and their mission is to grow the best plants possible for the betterment of humanity. They're based in Newark, in New Jersey. They've been named one of the world's most innovative companies by Fast Company 2 years in a row, and also by Time's Best Inventions in Food. The story is really, really interesting, and it does show what can be done with the genius and collaboration of engineers. And obviously, it would be rude not to mention BrewDog and say, look at what they're doing too. They've done so much work in reducing the vital impacts that have happened in many different businesses in their industry, and they're doing great work too. But Aerofarms is an example of vertical farming and collaboration is really interesting. So they're just there's a whistle-stop tour, as I know we're getting very close to the end, just for me to say these are some of the companies to look out for, the ones that I find their journeys are really, really interesting. Are you there, Helen?
Yeah, thank you, Angela. They are some incredible illustrations, actually, of how all of these organizations have brought together engineering ambitions and utilize the tools and resources available to them to create change. And this kind of leads me very wonderfully on to our very exciting news. You're all going to hear this for the first here on Engineering Futures webinar. Over the last 2 years, Angela and I have been working in collaboration with the Cambridge Engineering team to take the Engineering Better Care toolkit, not just to the healthcare sector, but to create an opportunity where everybody has access to these incredible tools. Today, we are officially launching the Engineering Better Care Academy, a training and learning community which applies engineering insights to real-world challenges and successfully delivers sustainable, measurable outcomes in innovation and transformation. The Academy is to take learning beyond the classroom and embed it directly with the people creating sustainable change. We have a 6-strong team of specialists from across engineering and business who facilitate the learning process, helping you to capture current knowledge and share different perspectives to develop the best solutions. In today's very complex, unstable, and rapidly changing environment, it is vital to bring all the voices to the table in an inclusive and open environment. And it's intended for people of all levels of experience and for challenges of all levels of be able to handle and to help you to handle in the long term. So if you've ever wondered how you might manage that next big challenge, then please get in. The contact details for the Academy are on the last side, and you can have a look at those, and please feel free to ask us questions. So with that in mind, Angela, what comes next?
Well, I think what's interesting is, and I chose this to say, I think we're already seeing what's coming next. We're seeing massive disruption and change. And what we need is more than ever, we need collaboration, and we need the big institutions and organizations out there to galvanize their activity and say, what can we do? And if you think you can't do it on your own, who can you turn to to empower more activity. And there was a lovely story that I saw very recently from the Institute of Civil Engineers, who have actually put together their own Institute of Civil Engineers Carbon Champions. And I love this. So they've really focused on working towards the, again, connected to Sustainable Development Goals. But what they've recognized is this need to have carbon champions and to have as many as they possibly can to get the message out there and to take out this big initiative supported by them that says, come on, we can all do it. The more people we have to spread the word, build the education piece around what happens when you have sustainable engineering, and that impact of collaboration really is what we need to do to make a change. So again, great story from the Institute of Civil Engineers. Do look them up. I think they've now got 27 individual carbon champions, and they're looking to have a lot more. And what that leads me to say is that in my work, a thought really, in my work at Oxford University, when I work with new startups, with amazing new technologies, I always have a very strong focus on something that is known as the sweet spot of innovation. And it's commonly when feasibility, how does it work? Viability, the business case, can it grow? And desirability for a product and service. And to me, that is all about bringing the people responsible for each of those core elements together and saying, what can we do differently? What can we do better? And what impact can we have? And on that note, I think that the more conversations take place early on by bringing the right people to the table, by challenging engineers and saying, well, what would you do about this? Rather than, sadly, something I've seen in the past, where a solution is made and then the problem is handed to engineers when they don't always have a chance to add their innovation, their knowledge and their experience to what could be done differently. And I'm sure you've got many, many examples of that, Helen, but I'll let you close and have the final word on what you'd like to see happening in engineering next.
Yeah. Thank you, Angela. Yes, I appreciate we're getting very close to time, and people have been extremely patient with my dropping in and out on the vocal. So thank you very much for that. I think I would by saying really that as engineers, we should really be applying and living by these principles that have been laid out by the Engineering Council. You know, contribute to building a sustainable and future, apply professional and reasonable judgment, do more than just comply to legislation, and you know, minimize the risks to society by thinking about what it is that you do and represent as engineers. And I think if you can live by that, great things can be achieved. So with that, I will end today. We would love to have questions from you. I'm already seeing some, and I've been trying to type responses to some of them as we've been going. So please feel free to ask us some questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. I did note there was one from Lauren. She's actually put a couple of she's talked about you know, the bare minimum that's being done in most cases with regards to sustainability and regulation, and how can we get buy-in from clients and colleagues. Angela and I get asked an awful lot, and this is the whole purpose of this presentation today, in talking about getting everyone around the table. Every stakeholder is vital to addressing you, no matter how complex it might be. And so the best way to get buy-in is to bring everyone into the conversation and don't leave anyone out. For me, that's the most important, by the idea of ensuring that sustainability is in everything that you do. Angela, would you like to answer any of that?
I completely agree with you. I mean, we won't mention names, but you and I both worked with a really interesting organization recently, and we were working with their graduates, and it was incredible because the organization that had invited us in gave us a huge scope to say, just find out what our graduate engineers really want to do with sustainability. What would they do if there were no limits? We actually developed an internal pitching competition, and we got teams to put forward their really, really big ideas. Some of them were certainly blue sky thinking, but I loved that. And I know you did too, Helen. We got every team to pitch, and then we got everyone else to vote on their ideas with an idea that people in organizations at any level, our message was, when you give them a voice and you say, what would you do? From those big ideas, some really incredible, empowering solutions emerge. And as a massive bonus, you're saying to those people in your organization, we want you to be innovative. We want you to think. And far too often, I don't know whether I should be saying this in a negative way, but I do believe that far too often sustainability or environmental management has been an office at the end of a very long corridor or Zoom call. And what it should be is part of how everybody works. And when you take that out to the wider scale and you open it up to people across an organization, what you get back is unbelievably exciting.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Angela. Matt, with regard to what are some of the useful skills to enable good communication and collaboration? Matt, I should first of all say you should come on one of our training courses and find out. But I think for me, I think we've answered that in some respects. Great collaboration comes from working through problems together, and everybody I think communication is all about the language that we use, and as engineers we often use language which is not very accessible to a lot of people, and I think by finding methodologies like C-Toolkit, which enables people to communicate with the common language, actually can break down those barriers and enable people to express what their issues are and how they would like to address them. So I think finding a common rating, I think, is vital in many of these situations. And that applies not just to sustainability, but any problem that needs to be solved, really. And lastly, I think Heather's up some of the examples and case studies. Yes, I'm sure we'll be able to. That many of them are sort of public domain pieces of information, so we can always direct you to news feeds and things like that, where you can read about some of these particular topics. And Neha has asked about carbon credits in controlling carbon emissions. I think, yes, they have a place, and there are many other opportunities that could be explored. I think they're one of many, and they in all situations. And this is unfortunately one of the problems that we face, is that ideas come up, particularly when they're socio-political ideas, and it's sort of one size fits all. And I think we need to be more bespoke to address some of these issues. So yes, I think carbon credits do have their place, but I think there are opportunities to develop other possible solution beneficial in different circumstances. It's a bit of a broad answer, isn't it? Really, sorry.
I think the only thing I would add to that, Helen, is that whether a company's initiative is carbon credits, an ISO standard, working with B Corp, working with Cradle to Cradle, whatever a company decides to align to, actually, if it's something that is communicated across the entire organization, and there's a commitment made, there's a measurable target, and it's shared and discussed and reported on regularly, then that is really always a positive way to go. As you quite rightly say, there are many options. There's carbon credits and there's many other things around that. But whichever one a company commits to, bring everyone in and focus so much on employee engagement. And increasingly, and we didn't have time to talk about this today, so it's the very last thing I'll say, we are going to see increasingly huge pressure on investors to have a different kind of commitments when they invest in new companies, removing any aspect of greenwashing and making sure that investments are in companies with transparent policies, procedures, and processes. We've seen that be changing to become a standard in Europe, and that will also be happening in the UK, if not this year, very early last year. So requirements on investors and the impacts that will have on where their money goes will also start for a huge change.
Well, I think that's all the questions we have time for. So thank you so much for today. Thank you for staying to listen to the presentation. We will obviously get as much of the presentation out to people to listen to afterwards. But from us, thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely to have the chance to share some thoughts.
Thank you both, Helen and Angela, for your contribution today. That was brilliant, and thank you so much, Helen, for continuing through your buffering. It was really appreciated, and I hope people found it super useful. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to end this webinar now. Thank you.
Thank you.